Welcome to the next section of Language Conventions. This section will focus on educator foundations. In this video, we will explore the different grammatical elements from a functional-based approach. We will also examine the key syntactic structures that educators need to be aware of. Before we begin, we want to emphasize that this video is not intended for use with students. This video is an overview of grammar and syntax for building educator knowledge. As educators, we need an awareness and an understanding of the skills we want our students to know and understand. Congratulations on taking the next steps in growing your understanding of grammar and syntax. So what is the difference between grammar and syntax? Grammar has to do with the role or function that words and phrases play in sentences, whereas syntax is all about the arrangement of those words and phrases into clauses and sentences. There are several common grammatical elements. There are nouns, pronouns, and adjectives, verbs and adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Three important syntactic structures include independent clauses, dependent clauses, and phrases. This is a quick overview of the most important grammatical elements by function. This slide can be found in the form of a PDF handout in the resources section of the website. When we take a functional approach to teaching grammar with young children in kindergarten and grade 1, we begin to explore the roles words play in sentences. We can do this without ever using the term associated with the grammatical element itself. For example, very early on, we can ask students who or what a sentence is about, thereby demonstrating to them that every sentence has a who or a what, a word that names what the sentence is about. Very quickly, they can then also begin to identify the action that the who or what is doing by answering the questions did what or is what. All the while, we are talking about the functional roles of these words in sentences and never calling them by their grammatical terms, in this case, nouns and verbs. As educators, it is important to always consider complexity so that we can start with the simple and build from there. Look at the list of nouns and verbs in the chart. Is there a difference in the complexity of these words? What is it? Which words would be easier for students to work with? When thinking about nouns, we most often think about people, places, things, and animals. Nouns name the who or what of a sentence. The most complex nouns are those that name concepts, emotions, or ideas. It's important to start with concrete nouns with young students and intentionally bring awareness to the more abstract concepts, emotions, and ideas as they build an awareness of the role that nouns play in sentences. Verbs also vary in their complexity. Most often, we think of verbs as showing action. These are the simplest and most concrete to work with. The verbs that represent being and having are more complex and harder for students to visualize. Adjectives have an important role in increasing the specificity and precision of oral and written communication. Adjectives tell more about the noun or subject of the sentence. They often answer a functional question like how many, what kind, or which one. Adjectives can be words, phrases, or clauses that describe color, size, quantity, nature, or any other characteristic that the noun may possess. They may also be demonstrative or possessive. As with nouns and verbs, the complexity of adjectives can be simple or quite complex. The idea is to expose students to the many different kinds of adjectives by helping them to see that ultimately the function of each of them is to give more information about the noun in the sentence so that the reader knows the exact message the author or speaker is trying to convey. These are all different types of adjectives, and although they all work in slightly different ways, they all serve the same function. Not convinced? Find the noun and ask the question, which one? Which dog? The big brown one. Which bag? The smallest bag. Which province? The 10 Canadians, and so forth. Adverbs are similar in function to adjectives in the sense that they tell more. In this case, however, the adverb tells more about the action or the verb. Adverbs often tell more about how, where, when, and why things happen. Adverbs can be in the form of words, phrases, or clauses. Let's take a look. As mentioned, adverbs can be words, phrases, or clauses, but essentially all function in the same way. Let's think about this sentence. She ran quickly. In this case, is the adverb a word, phrase, or clause? That's right. It's a single word that answers how did she run? Quickly. Let's think about this sentence. She ran through the forest. The adverb in this sentence is a little more difficult to spot. Think about this. Where did she run? That's right, through the forest. This is an adverbial phrase. It still functions the same way as a single word. It tells more about the verb ran. Finally, let's look at this sentence. She ran so that she could get away. In this sentence, so that she could get away is an adverbial clause. We will look at the difference between phrases and clauses in just a bit, but before then, can you figure out what functional question so that she could get away answers? That's right again. It answers the question of why she ran. Now that we have reviewed many of the basic grammatical elements, we will look at the basic syntactic structures. An independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. A sentence is an independent clause. Let's look at the two examples in the chart. The dog sat. There is a verb, sat. There is a noun, dog, and it expresses a complete thought. So does the next example. The gigantic dog with big ears sat on a mat. A dependent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb but does not express a complete thought. Rather, a dependent clause tells more about the subject or predicate in the independent clause. The examples in the chart show both complete sentences, both that have embedded dependent clauses. Finally, a phrase is a group of words that work together to answer a functional question. Imagine any of these phrases added to the independent clause, the dog sat. We can have the dog sat on a mat, the dog sat on a mat during the storm, or the dog with big ears sat on a mat during the storm. The key difference between a phrase and a clause is the presence or absence of a verb. Test your knowledge. Try this activity. You have just learned about phrases, independent and dependent clauses. Grab a piece of paper and make a 3-column chart. Pause this video and see if you can sort the phrases and clauses in the grid into each of the 3 categories. How was that? Take a look at the answer key to see how you did. Pause the video again here if you need. Otherwise, we will examine a few of the answers. Let's take a look at one of the independent clauses from our sorting activity. First, let's recall what an independent clause is. A group of words that contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. A sentence is an independent clause. Now let's think about this. I can go at 9. It is an independent clause because it contains a subject, it contains a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. Let's recall again, what is a dependent clause? A group of words that contains a subject and a verb, but does not express a complete thought. Rather, a dependent clause tells more about the subject or the verb in the independent clause. Now let's consider an example from the sort. As we parked in the driveway. It contains a subject, we. It contains a verb, parked, but it does not express a complete thought. It tells more about something, specifically when something happened, but not what happened. Finally, let's look at a phrase, a group of words that work together to answer a functional question. Between the rows of corn. It contains a subject, rows of corn, but it does not contain a verb. It does answer a question. Can you tell which one? That's right. It answers where something happened. We want to give special thanks to the staff and leadership team of the WRDSB for sharing their learning and resources for the development of this learning module. And a thank you to you for engaging with this module. We hope you feel like you know a little bit more and feel a little more comfortable with the concepts around grammar and syntax.